As I said earlier, this is one of my favorite feast days of our whole year. It's so favorite of mine that I even got a vestment made just with the Holy Family on it. Actually, this is my first Mass vestment, and it was on Trinity Sunday. And there's always a beautiful connection between the family and the Trinity, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But first, as I reflect on this myself, for many years, the Holy Family kind of frustrated me. We hear in our prayers like, Lord, allow us to see in the Holy Family an example of the way to live, right? But most of us, when we look at the Holy Family, we're like, man, that family looks a lot different than my family, right? And somehow it devolves into a joke eventually, okay? Eventually it goes something like this. Well, if Mary and Jesus were the ones without sin, then everything must have been Joseph's fault, right? All the husbands out there shaking their head, huh? Do you feel like that sometimes? And I think sometimes we can think of the Holy Family as like this nice ideal that can never be reached in our lives. Like it's something over there that's nice, but doesn't really mean much for us because we could never be like Mary or Jesus or even Joseph. But I think the Lord today gives us these very beautiful readings to kind of dispel from our heart this idea, this false notion of what holiness means in the context of our families. I think I always fall into the trap of thinking that holiness means that everything is like peachy and good, and there's no struggles, and there's no, tensions in our families, and there's no trials to overcome. But clearly, by the readings the Lord gave us in today's Mass, is not the case. I think we have to see in the Holy Family not holiness that escapes the trial, but holiness that enters it and that brings faith from it. Actually, the only two stories that we hear about Jesus in his childhood are pretty traumatic stories, right? The first one here, when we hear that Joseph's forced to get up out of the middle of the night and to become a refugee and flee all the way to Egypt. We'd like to think that they probably hopped on Egypt Air or something on the airplane and headed over to Egypt, right? Not the case, huh? Got on a donkey, right? Walked next to Mary and Jesus all the way there, trusting that somehow they were going to have a place there, left everything behind. They suffered a lot that night and through those months living in Egypt as refugees. Doesn't seem to me like a cherry experience there, huh? And then the only other thing we hear about Jesus of his childhood is what? Him getting lost in the temple and him freaking out his parents, right? And they couldn't find him. It seems like those things aren't what we would think in our minds of what a Holy Family would have to go through. I think sometimes we think that holiness means that we're going to be free from the trials and the tribulations. But in fact, I think it's different. I think holiness is about opening ourselves to the reality that we have a God who brings us together, that we have a God who is with us, a God who is Emmanuel, a God who enters the family to restore it, to heal it, and to keep it together. I think that the virtue of family life at the end of the day is togetherness. And I think that that's what Jesus is teaching us as he entered the life of that little Holy Family. He says that together, with me at the center, we're going to go much farther than we could ever go on our own. And that's why God gave us families, huh? To know that we could have somebody next to us that says, you're not alone. Have someone next to us that says, together we're going to get through this. And the gift that family life is for us is the gift of togetherness. But my hope and my prayer is that in that togetherness, that these two fruit would come out of it. And I think these are the two marks of a holy family besides just a regular family. A holy family is one who is marked by unity and one who's marked by a spirit of peace. Because those, I think, are the two fruits when we allow Christ to come in to dwell within our hearts and to dwell within our homes. That the Lord brings us together through his dwelling with us, and he gives us the fruit of peace in our lives. I know that I wish those two things for my family overall. I want them to be unified and I want them to have peace. I want them to be together, huh? I long for that so much that every day on my day off, I go home and I cook dinner for my family and they come back from wherever they are and we have this one meal together. Like my heart longs for togetherness because our hearts long for togetherness forever, right? Our desire for our families is that we would be together forever in eternity. That's how we know that that's a mark of holiness. But that seems far off for us. It seems that those things seem far away most of the days in our family life. But I think St. Paul, in today's second reading to the Colossians, gives us a recipe for holiness. He gives us a recipe for togetherness. And that recipe, he says, put on heartfelt compassion. Be kind, be gentle, be forgiving. But he says, above all, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. Above all, put on love. The word family comes from the Latin root word famulus. Funny word, right? Do you know what that word means, though? Famulus? It means servant. It means servant. It's the one who serves. And I think sometimes in our families we can get a little bit self-centered. We can start to think, what's in this for me? Or maybe we withhold our love from our son or daughter or our spouse or our brother and sister because of something that's been done to us. But the grace of God is one that continues to call us to reach out. It's the one who continues to call us to press into situations with love rather than to run into our hearts away in that selfish desire that sometimes we fall into. To be a servant is someone who says, what's the good for you? How can I make a sacrifice so that you can have life and life in abundance today? And that's what keeps our families together in unity. And that's what gives us that bond of peace. Not thinking that we're in it just for ourselves, but that we're in it for them. There's a beautiful piece that Paul gives us too. He says, wives, be subordinate to your husbands. And everyone's like, what? Right? Submission, subordination, right? Obedience, all of these dirty words in the American culture, huh? But again, the Latin, suborder, submission, under the order of, under the mission of. And husbands, if you're under the mission of love, if you're under the mission of God, there's nothing to be feared to be under that mission, is there? Under the mission of love. And husbands, love your wives as what? Christ loves the church, giving himself up on the cross for her expiation. He came to serve his people. He came to lay down his life so that the others could have life. And don't provoke each other, huh? Man, in my family, it's crazy. You know exactly where each other hurt, right? And you know exactly what's going to hurt when you say a word. So I'm provoking each other, right, to get a response. Paul says, don't do that. What that does is that creates resentment in our hearts. What that does is it drives a wedge of resentment that eventually pulls us apart as a family. And when we have resentments, those are the things that need to be forgiven, because those are really those seeds that turn into seeds ultimately of division and separation in our homes. I can say with confidence that every issue that I've ever seen in my own family and in all the families that I serve throughout the years has always been a seed of division. Something is in there that has wedged themselves in between. It's a me against you situation. But we have a God who says, I want to enter that. I want to come into there, and I want to heal that. I want to bring you back into unity. I want to give you back that peace that you long for, and I want you to give that to each other. Family is so important to God because family is the only thing that can actively, in a live way, witness and image the Trinity here below. The family is a walking, living, breathing icon of the Trinity. Have you ever seen an icon before? Father John had one he brought out. I don't know if it's still here, but there's some, right? They're paintings, right? In the Eastern Church, the icon tradition is that they're written, and we see in them this picture, but we don't just stop at the picture. We see that, and it directs us right to God. It takes us and it lifts us up, and it points us to the source of that photo, that picture, that painting. And I think we too, as families, you guys, when people see you, do they see God? When people see you, do they see the Trinity? Do they see the eternal family of God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit? God is a family, and God wants to invite you to participate in that family through your love for each other here below. I think that the devil is so after families, especially in this generation, because he knows that if I can destroy the image of God here below, I can destroy the belief in God here below. I can destroy in people's hearts and in their minds this promise that I'm faithful to the end. I can destroy in them the belief that there's a home waiting for them in eternity if there's no home for them here down below. What you're doing as a family has never been more important. your voice to your children, in your life as a family who loves each other, who forgives each other, who serves each other in humility and kindness and gentleness has never been more important. Because if we don't live that out faithfully, we've lost this opportunity to image to the world the goodness of our God. But today the Lord wants us to stop. And He wants us to recognize that holiness is not just for that family, but it's for your family. And then holiness comes when we open our hearts and we open our homes to the person of Jesus.